I move any of these without causing any major issues? I just want, if I can just get a little bit of space.
I wondered about that.
You're okay, I just want to make sure I've got,
Is that okay?
that's good. I'll try to speak up, I know I'm soft-spoken.
Say like me.
Appreciate everyone being here. I apologize for both the heat and the delay. Welcome. Before I get started, I want to introduce everyone that's standing with me today. We've got Lieutenant Post Commander Joshua Lader of the Mount Pleasant Post, Michigan State Police. Special Lieutenant Michelle Robinson, Public Information Officer, Michigan State Police. And Detective Sergeant Joseph McMillan, also of Michigan State Police, Mount Pleasant Post. What I wanted to kind of go over briefly is the procedure for today. What I plan to do is just give a brief update on where we are at in our case from the criminal side, some details of the events that unfolded over the course of the weekend in the last 45 hours, and then give Michigan State Police an opportunity to address the media as well, and then field questions that you may have for us as well. There are a lot of rumors floating around on social media, and likewise, some things we wanted to clear up. Today, Isaiah Gardenhauer was arraigned on a 12-count complaint. That arraignment, as you may have seen, did not go to completion due to his lack of cooperation during the proceeding. That will be reconvened and adjourned until tomorrow morning at 8:15. The 12 counts that he is going to be arraigned on, or was already partially arraigned on, were homicide, open murder, statutory short form, criminal sexual conduct in the first degree, home invasion in the first degree, assault with a dangerous weapon, another assault with a dangerous weapon, unlawful imprisonment, an additional count of unlawful imprisonment, and criminal sexual conduct in the first degree, an additional count of criminal sexual conduct in the first degree, an additional count of criminal sexual conduct in the first degree, a count of armed robbery, and a count of carjacking. The events that led up to that 12-count complaint unfolded in the last 45 hours. What we know, and please understand that there are some details of the investigation that we are not willing to provide at this point. Things are still being investigated, and as far as we're concerned, there are some details that we do not want to divulge at this time to protect the integrity of the case from a criminal proceeding standpoint. But what we know thus far is that on roughly on 8:15 Sunday morning on June 6th, here in Isabella County, there was a domestic assault that took place on South Isabella Road. That assault took place between Mr. Gardenhauer and his girlfriend, during which time he forced her to engage and complete an act of sexual assault. At some point during that altercation, Mr. Gardenhauer's attention turned to her daughter, who was in the home as well. When Mr. Gardenhauer went to retrieve her daughter, it's our understanding that the mother escaped the home, went to make contact with the police, and when the police arrived, they found that that the mother's daughter had been stabbed. Police initiated life-saving measures at that time, but ultimately the daughter was not able to survive the stabbing. Shortly thereafter, Mr. Gardenhauer had fled the scene. He was already gone upon the arrival of the police. He indicated that he was hiding out in Jamestown Apartments. He was hiding in Jamestown Apartments until sometime the next evening when he made contact with two other individuals, also residents of Jamestown Apartments. He struck the male occupant of the home and entered the apartment. And at that time, he held the two occupants of the apartment essentially hostage, indicating that they were not able to leave. During that time, he initiated forceful acts of sexual assault upon the female occupant of the residence on multiple occasions. Sometime that next morning, Mr. Gardenhire left the Mount Pleasant area using the vehicle that belonged to the residents of that apartment at Jamestown. He stole money from the occupants of the apartment and their vehicle and traveled to Flint, where he was apprehended by local law enforcement and turned over to Michigan State Police from the Mount Pleasant Post, and ultimately he was transported back to Isabella County Jail. Those are the details that we're willing to share at this time. There are obviously additional details that will unfold throughout the pendency of this case, but that is the information that I'm comfortable sharing at this time. There is a lot of other conjecture and rumors that were floating around social media. The information that I provided to you today is, to our knowledge, the complete and accurate information that relates to Mr. Gardenhire in Isabella County. This is certainly a horrific tragedy and a completely senseless loss of life. We know that these events caused the entire community to be on edge, but we're confident that any harm or any fear that was caused by Mr. Gardenhire is now over, as he is in custody. And our focus now is on the healing of the victims involved in this case and providing any services that we can and any opportunity of closure and justice for them, and ensuring that the justice system operates properly as we know it will. At this point, I'd like to hand it over to Lieutenant Lader from the Michigan State Police to address media. I know he has some remarks prepared that he would like to share with you, and then I will turn it over to Lieutenant Robinson. I should say, I probably should have gone over this in the beginning as far as the spelling of names. I'll go over that in the end.
Thank you, Prosecutor Barbary. I did notice a couple of hands in the gallery, but there will be a time to ask some questions at the end here, so thank you for your patience on that. As he said, my name is Josh Lader. I'm blessed with the opportunity to be the post commander here at the Mount Pleasant State Police Post, and this city has been my town for 23 years now. And in those 23 years, I've grown to love this community. I've grown to love the people in it. And over those 23 years, there's been times of celebration, and your law enforcement community has celebrated with you. There's been times of loss, and during those times of loss, we've celebrated with you and grieved with you. There's been times of challenge, and we've come together as a community and faced those times of challenge. And I would tell you, within the last 45 or 50 hours, as a community, we've faced both grief and challenge again. So the first thing I want to say from my brothers and sisters in the law enforcement community, if you are grieving from the loss of a loved one who was taken from you too soon, our hearts go out to you. Our thoughts and prayers go out to those families. We care about you. If you're the victim of a crime who's starting that healing process after what's happened in the last 45 or 50 hours, our hearts also go out to you, and our thoughts and prayers are with you as you work through this in a healthy way and you start the road to healing. For the rest of the community, I want to make it clear that we understand this impacted everyone. We understand that there was fear. We understand that there were challenges. But I have to thank you as a community. I have to thank you because you stood up for your neighbors. Some of you made calls just to check on neighbors, make sure their property's secure, maybe they were okay. Some of you called a loved one or someone you care about just to make sure they were physically and emotionally okay, or if they needed to talk. Some of you are the people that made dozens and dozens of phone calls to the Isabella County Central Dispatch Center with tips to partner with law enforcement to help us as a team work through this investigation. So although there's grief and although there was challenge, once again, we in law enforcement appreciate this community. We cannot do our job without a community who works with us, and you have defined teamwork in the way you rose to this challenge. And I just want to thank you sincerely. In thanking the community, I would be remiss if I didn't thank a litany of specialists and partners in law enforcement who stepped up and said they cared about you as a community and they wanted to come in and contribute. Within moments of this incident being reported, every single police agency in Isabella County had stepped up and said, what can we do to help? We received calls offering for detectives to be embedded in the investigative team. We offered for additional people to be called in for patrols and whatever we needed. That included the Isabella County Sheriff's Department and their personnel, the Mount Pleasant Police Department, Central Michigan University Police Department, the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal Police Department, the Shepherd Police Department, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources and their personnel and special equipment, the Michigan State Police 6th District Special Investigations Section, and officers from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. We can't do this unless we have a team, and that team stepped up to help you because they care about you as a community. We had partners on specialty teams that came in. The 1st, 3rd, 5th, 6th, and 7th District fugitive teams from the Michigan State Police all stepped up and were working around the clock to make sure they were protecting you and helping with this process. The DFAT Federal Fugitive Team out of the 3rd District came up and was instrumental in helping. Our multi-jurisdictional drug teams came in with CMET and MINT, both putting in countless hours around the clock to help make sure everything was being done that could be done. The Michigan National Guard offered an analyst. We had our Joint Task Force analysts here. From the Michigan State Police, we had the Technical Services Unit, the Aviation Section, and the 6th, 7th, and 3rd District Emergency Services teams here around the clock. The Michigan State Computers Crime Unit was actually invaluable in this as well. No one person or no one group did this. It was a community effort with law enforcement partners that were able to take this grief head on, embrace the community, and hopefully move forward. I also want to thank our professional communicators at the Gaylord Regional Communications Center, the Michigan State Police Emergency Operations Center, and the Isabella County Central Dispatch, because without those professional communicators, the countless tips that came in that they sorted and made sure were organized and got to us, we can't do our job without their expertise. Those men and women were unbelievable in supporting us. So again, our hearts go out to you. Our prayers are with the families who are hurting right now. We love this community. We know that we're going to move forward together. We went through this together. And as a representative from law enforcement, thank you very much for that community attitude and approach. I'll now turn it over to Special Lieutenant Robinson.
Thank you, sir. We will open it up for questions here in just a moment. There are a couple questions that have been asked throughout the investigation that Prosecutor Barberry would like to address, and then we'll turn it back over to First Lieutenant Lader to address those questions that he would like to answer as well. Sir?
There was one question that was posed to us several times, and that was in relation to the status of Mr. Gardenhire being on bond out of another county. To our knowledge, Mr. Gardenhire was on bond for a criminal sexual conduct in the 2nd degree. I don't know the specifics about the decision behind his bond, but it's my understanding that his bond was set at $7,500 with a 10% cash surety. I believe he posted the $750 and was out on bond. Those are actually, I'm sorry, I believe he used a bondsman to post bond and was out on that bond. With regard to that, we don't know exactly what went into that decision. Certainly, Mr. Gardenhire does have criminal history, and he was on bond for a criminal sexual conduct in the 2nd degree. In my opinion, while it might be easy to criticize the decision of the bond that was set by the magistrate, I think what we're actually seeing is the byproduct of a kinder, softer, gentler approach to criminal justice. And while in many ways, when things look good in Lansing, what Lansing decides and what they think is good for us does not always translate in real world. And this is a scenario where this was a bad person and his bond needed to be set high. But there's been a lot of discussion lately with bail reform and setting no cash bail, personal recognizance bonds, etc. And unfortunately, sometimes this is the byproduct. It's an unfortunate consequence, the unintended consequence of no cash bail and bail reform. Any questions as it relates to that?
What county was the accident in?
It's my understanding it was in Mason County.
Any connection between that case and this case?
None that I'm aware of.
Do you know when he bonded out?
I do not.
What's the connection you're drawing between bail reform measures and this particular case?
Based on Mr. Gardenhire's prior criminal record, the fact of the matter is it surprises me that his bond was set so low. With the legislative pushes and bail reform push to reduce bond, my belief is that Mr. Gardenhire was let out at a reduced bond as a result of that push. And had he remained in custody, frankly, I don't think this incident would have occurred.
Earlier, did you say 8:15 or 3:15 Sunday morning?
3:15 Sunday morning. If I said 8:15, I apologize. Any other questions as it relates to bond? And after Lieutenant Lader speaks, I'd be happy to entertain any questions in general.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to address one question because it's popped up a couple of times. Throughout the course of an investigation like this, it is a rapidly evolving, rapidly changing situation. And as you can imagine, from those first few minutes of response to 45 hours later, there's constant information, there's a lot to this, there's a lot of layers of this type of investigation. And so what we're constantly striving to do is to keep the community, to keep you as our media partners abreast of what's going on. One of the questions that was asked, and it's a fair question, and I want to just explain what happened here. A question was asked, why did a statement come out from law enforcement saying there's, quote, no threat to the public, and then later the same day a statement came out telling people that they were encouraged to secure their property, their homes, and that type of information? It's actually quite simple. The original news release that went out did not say there's no threat. There was a reporting online that said police say there's no threat. That was never put out by our investigative team. That was not a quote by anyone on the team. I have a copy of the news release here, and it's important to understand the timing of this news release. It says, at this time, there does not appear to be an immediate danger to the public. The reason for this is we're fielding dozens and dozens of questions saying, is this a random act of violence? Is this someone who's on a spree? Are they just randomly going around hurting people? At the time of this release, we got the investigative team together and said, what do we know? Everyone that was involved at that point, they were known to each other. We understood that it was a domestic violence type situation that started that. We understood that the people we could help, we were giving the best help. And we understood that a weapon had been involved and that weapon was recovered. And we understood that the suspect had fled the scene. So at that time, all the information we have is that this is isolated within a known familial unit, and it was an individual incident. A lot of people were saying the community was afraid someone was going out committing just random crimes. It was very carefully and intentionally worded to say that at this time, it does not appear to be an immediate danger to the public for that reason. There were no indications. It's important to note that on the same day, later on June 6th, when we did find out that this suspect appeared to still be in the area, a second announcement was put out with detailed information on the car we now know. We knew at that time that the suspect had stolen, as well as descriptors of the suspect. And it was updated to say residents of the Mount Pleasant area are encouraged to keep their homes, outbuildings, and vehicles locked. If he is observed, call 911 immediately and do not approach. This was sent out through our district PIO. This was shared with all the chiefs of police in Isabella County so they could share it on whatever social media mediums they use. It was also shared with the Isabella County Central Dispatch Center so a code red message could be put out. Code red in this area is a system where you can subscribe to, and if there's emergency notice where you need to be aware of something, it lets anyone who's subscribed know that. So I hope that clears it up. The information put out at the time fit everything that we knew. There was no indication of a further threat, but at no time did we put out a press release saying there is no threat to the public. So if that's a question that you receive, I hope that allows you to answer that. Any questions on that particular issue, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you very much.
Okay, at this time, we will open it up for questions.
Was Gardenhire, go ahead. The name of the deceased victim going to be released?
At this time, it's not going to be. And the reason that we do that is we do protect the innocence of a young adult. When we do have a young victim like this, we don't want their name to be put out in the media out of respect for that individual, and out of the respect for the family.
Does Gardenhire live in a residence where this took place, or was he a visitor in the residence?
Did live there? Go ahead.
it was confirmed that Mr. Gardenhire had lived there, had stayed there, and had a familial relationship with the people there. And both the young girl and the mother, there was a long-term relationship there, so he was known to them.
But he was living there at the time this happened, or, because I know that it was his girlfriend this happened to, but did he live at the residence at this time?
I can't personally confirm that, and I don't want to step outside of what I know, ma'am. Detective Sergeant, do we know if he was staying there at the time?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Was he ever near Shepherd? There was a report yesterday of a possible sighting, which is why they kind of went to secure mode school district did. Was he ever in Shepherd at all?
I can't share with you because I don't know where he was 24 hours a day during that period, sir, but what I can tell you is with dozens and dozens and dozens of tips coming in, especially with that stolen car, if you look around town, you will notice, if you look for a black Ford Fusion, one parking lot, one of our teams found over 30 black Ford Fusions. And so anytime there was a tip on a black Ford Fusion that seemed to fit the stolen vehicle, we did follow up with our team checking on those leads to make sure it wasn't the stolen vehicle we were looking for. As far as Shepherd schools locking down, there were a lot of organizations, schools, hospitals, different places that called and asked, what is the current status of this incident? We were honest with them about what we knew and left it up to them with their policies and procedures to make that determination of how they best wanted to protect those they were responsible for.
With Jamestown apartment, how many, like, when did he actually break into one of those apartments? And then how many occupants were in there? At first it sounded like 2, but then I was thinking maybe 3 because it sounded like you said there was an additional female occupant, or if you could clear that up, that'd be great.
The time that he entered a vacant apartment at Jamestown. The information that we have is that he entered a vacant apartment at Jamestown, hid out in a vacant apartment, and kind of monitored another apartment at the same residence or at the same apartment complex. And roughly around, I believe it was about 11 p.m., made contact with those 2 individuals, just 2 individuals, one female and one male occupant of that apartment complex or apartment.
Did he know those occupants?
No. To our knowledge, he had no connection to them whatsoever. There may have been a contact or a connection with a prior resident of that apartment.
What's Gardenhire's criminal history? Is this his second time in trouble with the law, or has he been in trouble with the law before?
He's been in trouble with the law on multiple occasions. I'm not going to go into his entire criminal history, but it does include violent offenses, weapons offenses, and other crimes of that nature.
Has he ever been in prison?
He has.
For how long? When?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Is his role in any other local deaths being investigated? That was a rumor reporting when I was involved in another local death.
No local deaths that we're aware of, no. And those are the types of things that we wanted to clear up in this meeting. We know that there was, again, a lot of rumors on social media, and that was being one of them. To our knowledge, that everything that we've described to you today is all that we have on Mr. Gardenhire as of this time.
Besides Gardenhire acting out in court that we all saw, has he said anything to you that you can share with us, anything at all?
I'm not going to go into any statements that he may or may not have made to us when he was detained.
One more question.
How are the apartment residents doing today as far as injuries?
They're obviously very emotionally shaken up. It's a very traumatic thing to go through. I can't fathom having to go through and live through that. But physically, I believe they are both doing okay. But obviously, emotionally, it's going to be a long road to recovery.
Anyone still hospitalized?
Not to my knowledge. Is that correct?
Okay, we want to thank everybody for being here today. Any updates that progress throughout the investigation and throughout the trial and criminal or court proceedings from here on out will be directed through the prosecutor's office. And once again, I want to thank everybody for being here today.
Can we get names and titles? Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Do you want to do that? Do you want me to?
Yes.
Okay. So we've got Lieutenant Josh Lader. You want Josh or Joshua?
Josh is fine, too.
And that's last name is Lator. Lieutenant Michelle Robinson, Michellerobinson, and title is Public Information Officer for the 6th District, Michigan State Police. Is that correct? And Detective Sergeant Joe McMillan, McMillan. And then my name was David Barberry, Barberi.
Thank you again.
I'll check with